Bahrain and Oman are to benefit from a multi-billion-dollar aid package from their richer neighbours.
$10 billion for the Kingdom of Bahrain and $10 billion for the Sultanate of Oman. We believe that this is an ambitious program, but it also shows the strong support that comes from the GCC countries to the Sultanate of Oman and to the Kingdom of Bahrain.
These protesters are chanting down with the regime and no Sunni, no Shia, we are Muslim. But the Saudi Sunni leadership is deeply suspicious of the role of Shia powerhouse Iran in all of this. There's a call for protests across the country on Friday, despite an official ban. There are reports that when this protest was repeated in Qatif on Thursday, police fired on the crowd, injuring at least one person, according to a witness. Bernard Smith, Al Jazeera.
Well, the unrest in Saudi Arabia, Libya and other oil producers is being blamed for a big drop in U.S. stocks. The Dow Jones Industrial Average had its worst day in 7 months, falling 1.9%. Energy producers were some of the biggest losers. Well, plenty more still ahead, including the Dalai Lama gives up his political role. And it's taken 3 years, but thousands of tons of construction material is finally on its way to Gaza. Those reports when we come back.
As the rain pours over Johannesburg, we'll keep your spirits up.
Across the United States on Wednesday, we saw 16 tornadoes touch ground across the southern part of the United States, all due to this frontal boundary moving through. Now, as we go into Friday, not much of a chance of severe weather, so we're going to be seeing some clear skies there. Dallas looking fairly nice at about 23 degrees into their forecast, but up towards the northwest, very heavy rain showers in the forecast all the way from Vancouver down towards parts of Seattle, and also snow across the north central part of the United States as well. Let's make our way down to South America. We're going to be seeing some very heavy rains all the way from Rio and inland. They saw quite a nice carnival. Some showers were in their forecast, but now heavier rains are going to be pushing in. They're also going to be pushing down through parts of Uruguay and into Buenos Aires over the next couple of days. Also, unfortunately, more heavy rain is going to be in the forecast for La Paz. They had seen mudslides and landslides this past week, and more rain does not mean good news for them, unfortunately. High temperature of 13 degrees there. As we make our way towards Europe, the big story in Europe, of course, was a big snowstorm that went through Greece and then into Turkey. We saw immense amounts of snow in the region, up to about 200 millimeters of snow. They're going to be clearing out over the next couple of days, but the snow is still going to be a problem for traveling there.
Qatar Airways, world's 5-star airline.
Mental disorders affect millions of Chinese citizens. But with a chronic lack of support, is this a social time bomb threatening to leave victims and broken families in its wake? 101 East, at this time on Al Jazeera.
Places we go and things we see determine what we know and who we are. Open your eyes to a world of documentaries. Witness at this time on Al Jazeera.
Welcome back. You're watching Al Jazeera. Let's recap our top stories now. The son of Libya's leader has warned rebel fighters the time has come for a full-scale military assault. But foreign ministers from Arab Gulf states are joining mounting international pressure on the Libyan regime. They say Gaddafi's government has lost legitimacy. NATO and the EU have agreed to send warships closer to the Libyan coast, while French President Nicolas Sarkozy has recognized the opposition National Council as the rightful government in Libya. Saudi police have opened fire during a protest in the eastern city of Qatif. People were rallying for political change and the release of 9 political prisoners. Let's talk now to Anita McNaught about the situation in Libya. She joins us from the capital, Tripoli. As you're probably aware, Anita, the GCC is issuing a statement against the Libyan government. Is any of this international pressure having any impact on the government there as it calculates how to deal with the opposition and rebels?
Well, I think it may initially have been worried that some form of military action or some form of logistical obstruction would be put in place that would stop it from taking the action that I think it always realized it would have to take. But, Sami, you have to remember, this is a regime that for much of its more than 40-year duration has had the status of a pariah state. As Saiful Islam said to me when I interviewed him nearly 10 days ago, we're used to sanctions. They don't bother us. We know how to survive in this sort of climate. So while the international community rallies round to call Libya various sorts of names from illegitimate downwards, here in Libya they're just carrying on with doing what they feel they need to do, which is dealing now with an insurrection, not anymore a form of political protest, but an armed rebellion by people the Libyan government believes are inspired, they tell us, by organizations like Al-Qaeda, and that's something that is Libya's business to deal with, and Libya's alone.
What is going on the ground from what you're able to gather, Anita? It seemed last week like the rebels were on a kind of a roll towards the west. Has that now been stopped in its tracks?
Well, they had momentum, they had enthusiasm, and they had an element of surprise. Tripoli wasn't expecting the uprising, I think, in the early days that it had. They weren't expecting this concerted movement because for so long all forms of opposition in this country have been either suppressed by the security services or in essence kept quiescent by the handouts from the government here. But Tripoli now dealing with the situation it has, and the rebels being, many of them, untrained, inexperienced, improperly supplied, inadequately equipped, many having borrowed munitions from the Libyan government's armories. It's almost inevitable that at some stage the enthusiasm and the passion would begin to run dry. The distances in this country that they've had to cover are enormous, and they simply aren't equipped in any sense in the way, or organized in the way the legitimate army is. Not only that, but we've seen over the past 2-3 days an steady increasing use of force by the Libyan armed forces against the protesters, in some places much more severe than others. The reports coming out of Zawiya, the city just to the west of Tripoli, are of a city absolutely smashed to bits. And despite what the foreign minister told me in an interview last night, that they weren't using airstrikes against civilians, they were only bombing open ground in order to frighten people and keep them away from essential facilities like oil ports. We see today that they've bombed the hospital, an airstrike against the hospital in Ras Lanuf that had doctors and injured patients fleeing the facility. So clearly civilians are no longer immune from government targeting, and the International Committee of the Red Cross, who did remind both sides not to target things like hospitals, is now calling this a full-scale civil war.
All right, Anita McNaught there from Tripoli. A congressional hearing underway in the United States has led to accusations of Islamophobia.